We begin with a major decision by General Motors to cut jobs and close some of its plants. The car maker announced today it is shutting down at least.
This warning from the CEO of the nation's largest automaker, General Motors, about the impact of the tariffs on the car industry. Mary Barrett told shareholders the tariffs on imported cars and auto parts will cost GM between $4 to $5 billion this year alone.
General Motors has been making big changes. The company has decided to move away from gas-powered cars and focus on electric vehicles, or EVs. But most importantly, they're shutting down longtime US factories. So why is GM taking such a big risk, and does this mean fewer jobs for Americans in the future? Let's find out in today's episode. One of the biggest steps GM has taken in this new direction is closing several of its old factories. In total, GM announced that it would shut down 5 plants, 4 in the United States and 1 in Canada. These plants were mostly used to make gas-powered cars and trucks. Along with these closures, GM is also cutting about 14,000 jobs. These job losses include both factory workers and office employees. For many, this news was shocking and painful. These factories were more than just workplaces. They were key parts of local communities and economies, and families had depended on these jobs for decades. Now, with one announcement, their future looked uncertain. But GM is not doing this to save money in the short term. The company is looking far ahead. It has committed around $35 billion to the development of electric and self-driving cars, and that's a huge investment. To give some perspective, GM made only $10 billion in profit in 2022. So, it is putting more than 3 times that amount into its future vehicle plans. This shows how serious the company is about changing the way it makes cars. Part of this investment is going into new factories or transforming old ones into high-tech EV production centers. For example, in Detroit-Hamtramck, GM has set up a place called Factory Zero. This is where it will build electric vehicles using the latest technology. Another big location is in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and these factories are not just being upgraded, they're being completely changed to suit the new style of production. They include new robots, automated systems, and setups that need fewer people to run than traditional car factories. This is where another big problem comes in. Electric vehicles are simpler to make than gas cars. They don't have engines with hundreds of moving parts. Instead, they run on batteries and electric motors. Because of this, EV factories often need fewer workers. Even as GM builds new plants, it's likely that these places won't hire as many people as the old factories did. So, while GM says it's creating the future of driving, it's also cutting the number of jobs available to American workers. This trade-off is at the center of the debate around the company's decision. Not everyone is happy about what GM is doing. One of the loudest critics has been President Donald Trump. He has made it clear that he doesn't agree with GM's direction. He believes that companies should keep jobs in the United States and avoid shutting down American factories. Trump's main point is that American workers should not lose jobs just because companies want to chase global profits or new technologies. He's also worried about GM moving parts of its production to Mexico and Canada. In fact, around 30% of GM cars sold in the US are made outside the country. This number becomes more important when you consider Trump's plans to increase tariffs on imported cars and car parts. Tariffs are taxes that are added to imported goods. If Trump raises these tariffs, it would make cars made outside the US more expensive. That would hurt companies like GM, which depends on parts and vehicles made in other countries. It could also mess up production schedules and raise the overall cost of making electric vehicles. This is a big risk for GM, especially now when it's investing so much money in building a new future. But GM has reasons for doing things this way. The company believes that it must become more like a technology company to survive in the future. It wants to compete with companies like Tesla, which are already leaders in electric vehicles. To do this, GM needs strong control over its supply chain. This means it wants to control the process from raw materials to the final car. One example is the $650 million GM invested in a lithium project in Nevada. Lithium is one of the most important materials needed to make EV batteries. By securing access to lithium from a US-based mine, GM is making sure it has what it needs for years to come. Despite this strategy, the conflict between GM and Trump keeps growing. In March 2025, GM CEO Mary Barra met with Donald Trump at the White House. The official reason was to talk about jobs and investment, but behind closed doors, things were more tense. Trump focused heavily on keeping jobs in America. Barra, on the other hand, brought data and plans showing how GM is trying to lead the global EV market. The two sides had very different views. Trump pushed for moving more production back to the US, while Barra argued for a global approach based on facts and future needs. One of the most important points discussed in that meeting was the federal EV tax credit. Right now, there is a $7,500 tax credit available to people who buy electric vehicles. This helps make EVs more affordable. Barra said that keeping this credit is necessary for the US to compete with countries like China and Germany, where governments support EV companies with even more money. Trump was not convinced. He said the tax credit looked like corporate welfare and hinted that he might end it. If that happens, companies like GM would have a harder time selling EVs at prices people can afford. After the meeting, both sides tried to control the public story. The White House said it was a strong but useful conversation. GM said it remains focused on innovation and sustainability, but there was no real agreement. News outlets quickly picked up on the disagreement. Some said that Trump was stuck in the past, others blamed GM for abandoning American workers, but both sides had supporters and critics. Wall Street also reacted. After Trump announced a 25% tariff on auto imports, the stock market dropped. GM's stock lost more than 6% in just a few days, and that's billions of dollars in lost value. Investors were worried. They'd put their money into GM expecting a smooth shift to electric vehicles. But now, with trade problems and political fights, the path looked much more uncertain. Analysts from places like RBC Capital and Morningstar warned that the tariffs might slow down GM's EV progress. They also said it could force the company to change its plans or rewrite important deals with suppliers. The public reaction was just as divided. In states like Michigan and Ohio, where GM has closed factories, people were angry. Union leaders said GM was choosing profits over people. Some workers felt betrayed. At the same time, there were others who said GM was doing the right thing. They argued that the world is changing and that the US needs to keep up. If companies like GM don't modernize, they could lose to international competitors, and that would mean even more job losses in the long run. So now, we have a strange situation. Both GM and Trump say they want to protect American jobs, but they're doing it in very different ways. GM is looking at the future and trying to build new kinds of vehicles using new kinds of materials and technologies. Trump is looking at the present and past, trying to bring back the old ways of doing things. It's a clash between two visions of what America should be. One is based on high-tech progress and global thinking, the other is based on keeping things close to home and protecting local workers. There's no easy answer to this problem. Electric vehicles are not going away. In fact, they are becoming more popular every year. More than 1.2 million EVs were sold in the US in 2023 alone. That number is expected to grow fast. So, GM is probably right to focus on this part of the market, but the challenge is making sure that American workers are not left behind in the process. Now, before you leave, just don't forget to comment down your thoughts on this situation. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well.